Please join me to welcome our next speaker, Mr. Craig Kelly MP, Federal Member for Hughes.
Thank you very much, and good evening, everyone. Firstly, I'd like to acknowledge my state parliamentary colleagues, Reverend Fred Nile, the Honourable David Clark, MLC, Andy Rohan, our member for Smithfield, and doing a fantastic job, Guy Zangari, our member for Fairfield, thank you, John Kay, MLC, and also Shakid Musulman, MLC as well. Thank you for coming here tonight. Now, I was back last year on the 21st of November that I was very pleased to join with the member for Bennelong, John Alexander, the member for North Sydney, Joe Hockey, and the member for Wentworth, Malcolm Turnbull, to speak in support of recognising the Armenian, the Assyrian and the related Greek genocides in our federal parliament. Genocides that were a direct result of a deliberate and systematic campaign against the Christian minorities of the Ottoman Empire between the years 1914 and 1923. Now, thankfully, my full speech has been reproduced in tonight's pamphlet, but I'd like to read just a few comments of the conclusion if I could. That's it. Now, if we're to learn from history, firstly, we must recognise that these events occurred. Secondly, we must look at the facts and the circumstances to ensure that the breeding ground for such genocides can never happen again. And we must learn from the Armenian and Assyrian genocides that any ideology that promotes one race as being superior to another, or one ideology that promotes a religion, that one religious faith as being inferior to another, is an evil and must be opposed. The words of Elie Wiesel, a Holocaust survivor, of Hungarian Jewish descent and a Nobel Peace Prize winner in the year 1986, sum up what we all must remember of the genocides. He said, "For the survivor who chooses to testify, it is clear. His duty is to bear witness for the dead and for the living. He has no right to deprive future generations of a past that belongs to our collective memory. To forget would not only be dangerous, but offensive. To forget the dead would be akin to killing them a second time." It is now time for our Parliament to join with other parliaments around the world to recognise these genocides for what they were. Those words are in our Hansard and will remain there for as long as our Australian Federation survives. Now, that was 9 months ago, and today the need for that recognition is more pressing than ever. For while much has been said about the recent Arab Spring in the Middle East, it is clear from the events of the last weeks and months that there is a present danger of the Arab Spring descending in a dark Islamist winter over the entire Middle East. For today, as we stand here, Christians throughout the Middle East, regardless of their affiliation, are being systematically harassed, persecuted and murdered. Churches are being bombed and burnt, and those attending Christian services have been killed. Christian homes have been ransacked and cemeteries have been destroyed. This is happening today as we speak. If we look throughout the Middle East today, in Lebanon, a nation where once 60% of the population were Christian, today there are only 1.5 Christian Lebanese left, approximately less than a third of the country. The former president of Lebanon, Admin Gemayel, has declared, and I quote, "Massacres are taking place, and for no reason without justification against Christians. It is only because they are Christians. This can only be called religious cleansing on a vast scale." If we look in Saudi Arabia today, it remains a crime even to hold a religious ceremony for any other faith other than Islam. And it is even illegal in Saudi Arabia to wear a Christian religious item. In Iraq, Only roughly 1/3 of Iraqi's Christian population prior to the war remain there today. And in 2010, Iraq's Christian leaders actually called off Christmas celebrations after a bloody assault on a major church. The Chaldean Archbishop explained, and I again quote, "Nobody can ignore the threats. The situation of Christians is bleak." In Iran, a man named Yusuf Nakadian has been sentenced to death by hanging. His crime? He converted to Christianity. In Turkey, less than 1 year ago, the head of the Turkish Catholic Church was repeatedly stabbed and decapitated by his driver, who shouted, "I killed the great Satan, Allah Akbar." In Egypt, Coptic Christians throughout the Egyptian region live in fear of the Muslim Brotherhood's growing power and are frightened for their survival. And today in Syria, we're seeing the complete breakdown of law and order, which should be a great concern, and we all should express great concern about the Islamic agenda in that country. For if an Islamist government were to come to power in Syria following the fall of the Bashar al-Assad regime, it would be a clear disaster for all, and it would portend a grim fate for the Assyrians and threaten the existence of all Christians in the Middle East. Now, the treatment of religious minorities, or any minorities, often tells us a great deal about the majority. Now, if the Islamic majorities in these Middle Eastern countries, if they hear no outrage from us, if they don't hear our voices, they'll continue to harass Christians. And why should they stop? Why should they stop the incitement and the intolerance if we here are not going to speak out? Now, the lesson from our history is a simple one. If we, as politicians and as religious leaders, if we do not raise our voices in protest, if we do not make it clear our moral outrage, if we do not promote and protect the freedom and conscience in all societies, then the dark hatred of religious bigotry is sure to inflict damage on an unimaginable scale, as it has done in the past. Therefore, today, we have an historic duty. We must recognise the Assyrian and related Armenian genocides for what they are. For it is only through the remembrance that we can ensure that these events never happen again. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Kelly. I'd now like to call upon Mr. Hurmus Shaheen to present Mr. Kelly with an award. This award is a certificate of recognition which will be presented to Mr. Kelly, the MP for member for Hughes, for his outstanding contribution in promoting recognition of crimes against humanity of the Assyrians, Armenians and Greek genocide in Australia and in Federal Parliament.